up once again for episode 18 of Krocking, Locking and Dropping with your favorite host, or, well, maybe I'm one of those hosts that you just don't want to admit that I'm your favorite because you are listening to other great hosts like the Shannon Sharps, the Stephen A. Smiths, or the J.J. Reddicks. Well, we'll talk about him in just a moment. But folks, this is episode 18 of Krocking, Locking and Dropping with Kenneth the K-Rock Klein here, and man, it's been kind of a little weird, bizarre situation around here, especially with summertime at Lamar University. Hardly any sports going on, well, except for the fact that we have two athletes competing in the U.S. Olympic trials. Hopefully they manage to get to the Olympic Games. If they qualify, I think they have to finish in like the top three in their respective events just to make it there. But we'll see what happens there. I wish them all the best of luck. But anyways, folks, we got some breaking news as far as this podcast is concerned. A couple of podcasts ago, I talked about the Los Angeles Lakers coaching situation, how they were in need of a new head coach, Darvin Ham, and one name that was brought about was J.J. Redick, a former NBA player turned podcaster who was considered to be a frontrunner for the position. Then, of course, he was kind of put to the forefront as the Lakers were going after Dan Hurley, but J.J. Redick, back in the limelight, he has accepted the head coaching position with the Los Angeles Lakers. What are my thoughts on that? Do I think it's a great move? Do I think it's going to be well? Do I think it's going to be a disaster? I don't know, folks. I guess by judging by my other segment I got, you'll have my opinion on the matter. And my other segment is going to be a top 5 segment, like I did last time, except this is a top 5 segment of the worst head coaching hires in history of sports, at least in my time, or from the stories that I have heard of some terrible coaching hires. So, folks, you will not want to miss out on that. Top 5 worst coaching hires in sports history. Now, before we get into all that, folks, I got to ask you a question. When is it a point where people should say less or not spread the news or spread too much gossip or they provide too much information? Because I feel like in today's society, we are living where everyone seems to want to know everything about people's private lives. And look, I could care less what you do in the shower, what you do in the bed, what music you listen to, although if it's the same music I'm interested in, that's one thing. Or what exactly, why'd you break up? What was wrong with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or what have you? I don't really care about all that stuff. But after what I heard about today, I think it's safe to say that I'm going to have to bring this about because this is unfortunately the world that we live in. People's private lives get matter, and I would be very embarrassed if I were I don't want to say victim, but if I were on the receiving end of what happened here. So Matthew Stafford has been married to his wife. I want to say her name is Kelly Stafford. Let's see. Yes, Kelly Stafford. They've been married for over 20 plus years. They were college sweethearts at the University of Georgia, have some kids, and she's been by with him all this time, especially now that he is the quarterback of the Los Angeles Rams and won a Super Bowl with them a couple years back. But she was recently on a podcast. I believe the podcast was called On the Vine, or Off the Vine podcast, and she was talking to the radio host about something about Matthew, what life was like for him in college, was he nice and everything. But it's safe to say that she made some comments where she revealed a little bit too much about how she ended up dating Matthew Stafford. And folks, I got to tell you what, there is there were some comments that I don't know if you would necessarily say if you were in the situation with her, or if you were married to someone like her and this and that. But this is basically what she had to say when she discussed how she ended up getting Matthew Stafford to date her.
Wait, so was he trying to casually date and you were all in?
Oh, yeah, girl. Anyways, long story short, it wasn't that cute of a relationship at first. I hated him. I loved him. I dated the backup to piss him off, which worked.
Oh, yes.
He was like,
that'll do it.
He was the bad boy, too. Like, Matthew's so sweet and Southern gentleman and all that stuff. And the backup was the complete opposite.
Yeah.
Ooh, and it upset him. So they lived in the same dorm because athletes lived in the same dorm, and he would see my car there. And so at one point, he waited and followed me out and got in my car and wouldn't get out.
Stop.
And he was
You're like,
like,
this is so hot.
I was like, this is amazing. It's working.
Yeah.
I was get out of my car and he was like, he's not right for you. And I was like, what? You can't tell me that.
So to basically quote what she said, she was trying to woo Matthew Stafford, and one of the ways that she did it was by dating the backup quarterback while they were at the University of Georgia. And this was a way to make her real jealous, or to make Matthew jealous. And in her words, it absolutely worked, because Matthew tried to get into her car one day, and while on the outside, Kelly was really, excited and happy about this, or actually on the inside, while Kelly was excited and happy about this, she was like, "What are you doing? Get out of my car," and this and that. And Matthew's like, "Well, he's not right for her. He's not right for you. So, you should be better off with someone else." And, well, long story short, the two have been happily married for 20 years. And I gotta be honest, as much as I mean, look, I don't know what it's like to be charmed by a woman, okay? I mean, I haven't experienced that at this point. But as much as I, can understand what Kelly was trying to do, talking about how they got together, the comments were a little bit too much. And the issue I have was not necessarily, how you, talking about how you got together, but you dated the backup quarterback just to make someone jealous. So you basically used the backup quarterback. And that to me really rubs me the wrong way. Because what if the backup quarterback was actually interested in you? What if he was really head over heels in love with you? And she basically talked about him as a bad boy. Like, she made Matthew to be this nice, sweet Southern gentleman, whereas this was, the backup quarter was the bad boy and everything. And look, if whatever you choose, women, it's your choice. But she made this backup quarterback to be like the bad boy, and she only dated him to get someone to, like her. I mean, I've seen movies, I've read stories about this where a girl tries to make someone jealous by dating someone else and everything, and more often than not, it usually ends up with the girl actually falling in love with the guy she's trying to fake date to make someone else jealous. But in this particular case, that didn't happen. It was absolutely real life. But the thing that really bothers me about this is you make the backup quarterback look bad. I'm looking at a tweet here because there was somebody that actually commented about this, and apparently the backup quarterback, while he wasn't named, was revealed to be Logan Gray, who was the backup quarterback and the wide receiver for the Georgia Bulldogs back when Matthew Stafford played. The tweet said, "Logan Gray is the unnamed backup quarterback that's Kelly Stafford is referencing, having dated a University of Georgia to make Matthew jealous, not Joe Cox, who I guess some people thought was the actual date." And the guy says, "I don't personally care, but I knew Joe's wife in college, and she's a great lady. I've already seen a few off-color tweets about it, so share this information." And I guess he wants people to know that it was not, like, the way Kelly described this backup quarterback was not the right way. So, look, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, obviously everyone wants to know how you met this person and everything, and my brother is currently in a relationship, and assuming that this relationship he's in does work out, people are going to be wondering, how did you guys meet, or how did he propose and everything, or same thing with my sister too. But I just think the comment making this guy look really bad, and then dating the backup quarterback, that's a bad look, because number one, you're basically setting yourself up to look like the bad person here, and then you're also using the backup quarterback who might have an interest in you. Now, I can't say whether the backup guy was not interested or was interested in her, but either way, he found love somewhere else, and now Kelly's with Matthew. But I just think it's absolutely ridiculous how you have to basically make the backup quarterback look that bad with how you did it as well. And just the smirkiness about it. Like, come on. I know you ended up getting your dream guy, and you were fortunate to get your dream guy, because imagine what this would have happened. And I know Matthew was jealous, and ultimately it worked out, but Kelly, I mean, I wish you and Matthew all the best. I think he's a great husband to you and everything, and, you seem to have a really great relationship, but I would say a little bit less when describing how y'all met. But at the end of the day, I wish you all the best for a happy married life. So, yeah, I just think in this day and age, we need to be a little more careful with what we're trying to do when talking about some big issues or some personal stuff that may or may not be brought about or shouldn't be brought about when discussing lives, because that's what the tabloids are there for. They're trying to expose weaknesses to sell controversial stuff for ratings purposes and everything. So, yeah, I just be a little bit more careful there if I were you, Kelly. But anyways, all that being said, that is the first segment. Now we are going to be talking about the biggest story in all of sports. J.J. Redick hired by the Los Angeles Lakers to be the new head coach. My thoughts on that when we come back. It has been a very troubling pattern for the Los Angeles Lakers as of this offseason. They fired their head coach, Darvin Ham, after 2 years of underperforming from a coaching perspective. They were in search of a new head coach, and the top guy that they had in mind was Dan Hurley, who had won 2 national championships at the University of Connecticut. Looked like they had him in the bag, but then Hurley at the last moment says, I don't think it's going to work out. I'm going back to Stores, and I'm going to hopefully continue to build my legacy at the University of Connecticut. So the Lakers are without their top head coaching target. Then Jerry West, the great Laker legend, who they have a somewhat of a love-hate relationship, or some kind of beef for that matter. Jerry West passed away. And the Lakers kind of give out a bit of a 5-sentence statement, which really, for someone of his nature, should have deserved a whole lot better. Then, the Boston Celtics, their top nemesis, wins their 18th championship, which now means that the Los Angeles Lakers are currently in second in the NBA championship race. And just when you think things couldn't get any worse or any crazier for the Los Angeles Lakers, they have hired their new head coach, J.J. Redick. Former NBA player, current podcaster, a guy who's been on ESPN First Take battling Stephen A. Smith for some ridiculous claims of his. And he's also had his fair share of ridiculous claims, saying that, these old basketball players, guy like Larry Bird played with plumbers. Which, come on. How many plumbers did you play with, J.J. Redick? And weren't you one as well? But as of now, J.J. Redick is officially the head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers. And, folks, I gotta be real honest. I think everyone, or almost everyone, is probably thinking the same thing. What in the hell are the Los Angeles Lakers doing? You had a number of great potential candidates. You had Monty Williams, who just got fired from the Detroit Pistons, who could have been a great candidate. You had Sam Cassell, who has been an assistant coach for as long as I can remember. A guy that I really believe deserves to be a head coach, and he should. The guy is an assistant coach, and if he's not a head coach, then something is clearly wrong with the NBA. This isn't about just finding guys that are successful. It's about giving guys opportunities. And why aren't you giving these guys opportunities? Why is there all this conversations about there's not many minority head coaches in the NBA or any sports league for that matter? It's not so much that there isn't, that they're being passed over. It's that they're not getting any opportunities. That's why there's a problem here, and that needs to be changed. But I'm not going to discuss much about that for sure. So for the time being, J.J. Redick has signed a 4-year contract to be the next head coach of the Los Angeles Lakers. A guy that has an opportunity to be on the same path as Pat Riley and Phil Jackson, just to name a few. And then plenty of other great Laker coaches that had coached the team for quite some time. And, it's funny because there have been a lot of crazy great Laker coaches. I mean, Rudy Tomjanovich was a Lakers coach. It wasn't a long time, but it was only a short tenure. But he was a Lakers head coach for that matter. And the Lakers right now, I'm just disappointed that it has gotten to that point where they've decided to hire J.J. Redick when you clearly had some better options as well. Now, having said all that, reading the article by Adrian Wojciechowski, when asked about why Rob Pelinka offered Redick the job, he says, and I quote, Pelinka became sold on Redick's ability to connect with players and his basketball IQ, and believes surrounding Redick with an elite coaching staff will help shorten his learning curve into his first coaching job, sources says. Redick moved into the forefront of the Lakers search a week ago after Dan Hurley of Connecticut ultimately rebuffed. Yeah, so that was a whole different thing. So I guess the Lakers obviously have a clear understanding of what exactly they're doing. They're not only trying to get J.J. Redick to be the head coach, but they're also surrounding him with some elite head coaches as well. But still, that doesn't make sense. J.J. Redick has never coached a game in the NBA. He's never coached a game in college. He's never coached a game in high school. Shoot, he's never coached a game in Little League Basketball, Pee Wee, or even at the YMCA. He's never even been to the AAU. I don't even know if he knows what the AAU is. I'm sure he's been in a few AAU tournaments as well. I mean, go figure. The guy was really great enough to play basketball at Duke University under the guidance of Mike Krzyzewski. But I'm still speechless. I was hoping that it wouldn't happen because if I were a Lakers fan, which I'm not, but if I were a Lakers fan, I would not want J.J. Redick to be the head coach for the Lakers because this franchise has already become a joke. And it isn't so much that, I feel like the Lakers have turned themselves into the Dallas Cowboys. It's more about the brand than it is about winning. Now, yes, the Lakers did win a few years ago, and they have been more successful historically than the Dallas Cowboys. The Cowboys last won a Super Bowl in '95, but the thing is, these are two of the most iconic brands in all of sports history, and yet they're on the same path of being so clownish and so foolish. It's ridiculous how once upon a time we looked at the Lakers as the gold standard, not only with the Magic Kareem years, but also with the Shaq and Kobe years, and now they've become a bit of a joke. And other franchises that years ago would never have seen the light of day of winning a championship, like the Denver Nuggets or the Milwaukee Bucks, or even the Miami Heat for that matter, before LeBron decided to join up and D-Wade, having won one already, gave up his spot as a team leader, came by and won a championship. It's just absolutely mind-boggling that the Lakers decided to go after this guy when there might have been another option. Now, there has been some talk as some of the biggest reasons why the Lakers coaching job might not be the most attractive. The biggest reason, of course, is that of LeBron James. LeBron James has kind of had this unfair reputation of wanting things done his way. It seems like ever since he came to Los Angeles, he has tried real hard to get the players that he wants and the opportunity to be at least, I don't know if part owner is the right word here, but it's completely different than the LeBron James that dominated when he was in Miami, that won a championship when he was with Cleveland. It's just so different, and I said that when LeBron James first came to Los Angeles, he was there just for his acting gigs or stuff like that. I mean, he did win a championship, yes, but I just think that with LeBron James, there's just a lot of distrust there. Because coaches have to put their foot down and tell LeBron, hey, LeBron, this is the way I'm running it. This is my team. You're going to have to do what I say. If we want to win. But LeBron James isn't the kind of guy that is willing to accept that role, to accept the responsibility of being coached. Wilt Chamberlain, throughout his entire playing career, one of the reasons why he only won 2 NBA championships despite being one of the best players to ever suit up was the number of coaches. A lot of these coaches had a hard time taming the guy. They couldn't control him, and Wilt Chamberlain once said, no one controls me. And I think LeBron James clearly has that attitude that no one is supposed to control him. But I think he also recognizes that he needs someone that he could depend on. And who does he want, or who gets the job? JJ Redick, a guy that he started a podcast with. Like, I think it's kind of, I'm concerned because I think JJ Redick is going to have to give up a podcasting career, at least temporarily. Like, if it doesn't work out for him, he can go back to podcasting. But this is something you're going to have to give up. Not only that, you have to give up that podcast with LeBron James. And I just struggle to think that that dynamic can coexist. Now, I'm not saying J.J. Redick is going to be a bad coach, because we don't know. J.J. Redick is a guy that has an understanding for the game. He is someone that completely respects the game. But I sometimes question, if he's doing it because he thinks he can be a big role model to this Lakers team. But J.J. Redick was asked a question about why he would make a great head coach on another show, and this is what he had to say on that podcast.
What do you think is the thing about J.J. Redick that would make you a good coach?
I don't necessarily think it's one thing, but I feel like I know the game pretty well. Yeah. I feel like because of some coaches I played for, really specifically Coach K, like he taught me about adaptability. And our game, the NBA, changes so fast year to year. You could be in an era and you think it's going to be a 10-year era, and it could be a year or two. And so just having the mindset of the mindset of just being open to change, I think that's really good. I think one of my greatest skills as a human being is my ability to communicate and communicate in an open and transparent way. And I did that as a teammate. And I think that's part of coaching, is just not avoiding things and not avoiding confrontation. Locker rooms, team chemistry, it's a very fragile thing. We see it all the time in the NBA. And the other part of it is, like, I look at coaching as a way to help.
Yeah.
And, there's the competitive part of it for sure. That's a major driving force. But it's like I had so many people help me in my career, and not just head coaches, but assistant coaches, player development people. And they have such a valuable place in my heart and in my life. And I'd love to be one of those people someday.
So he's a guy that likes to communicate well with people. He obviously knows the game, and he certainly would like nothing more than to be someone that can help develop players in the future if this whole coaching thing doesn't quite work out. I respect him for those answers. Don't get me wrong. I know J.J. Redick isn't just some regular Joe Schmo who just got picked up off the streets. No, he knows the game of basketball, believe me. But to me, that answer isn't going to be too convincing. I think everyone understands that the Lakers' job is more than just a job. You're not coaching a high school basketball. You're coaching the most glamorous, and I'm saying glamorous because everybody knows the Lakers are at least a bigger brand than the Celtics, despite Boston winning more championships now. This is coaching a bigger brand than you would have ever done. And yet, here's J.J. Redick, who is being hired by the franchise that did something that my Houston Texans nearly did a few years ago when they were trying to hire their new head coach. They almost picked up a guy that didn't even coach high school in football. The guy that just was about to retire or had been recently retired, and they were going to hire him to be the head coach for an NFL team? No. They did something that the Indianapolis Colts did with Jeff Saturday, who had some coaching experience, but not high school, and the guy that was on ESPN as an analyst. Like, I think the Lakers are hiring, or they're following the Colts trend of hiring ESPN analysts to take over the job and everything. And look, this is not the first time a professional sports organization has done that. They tend to hire people who know the game, who like them and respect them, and certainly people that are only in the industry or ESPN industry with perhaps an opportunity to be a coach elsewhere in the future. And so I don't blame JJ Redick for taking a job, but I just hate the fact that it has come down to that particular moment for the Lakers. If I were an organization in disarray, I don't care what LeBron James says at any point. I need to hire someone that I can trust to get the team back to playoff contention. And then if they're able to get back in contention and you have a team that's on the cusp of winning something, then I might be able to go say, okay, I'll hire someone. But as far as JJ Redick is concerned, I think he should have started his career as an assistant or some player development. Because that's where I think most players turned coaches go through. They go through the rigors and the opportunities that they have. But, for JJ Redick to basically skip all that and now join the most branded team, I think it's it's just too risky. And it's just, I don't want to say it's going to be a bad move. I feel like it is a bad move, but I don't want to say it's going to really hurt his reputation, because at the end of the day, JJ Redick still has his podcast and he still can offer his insight and takes. I just think the fact that he has been hired to coach the most prestigious team in all of sports is just mind-baffling, especially when he doesn't have any coaching experience. But that's not to say I don't think it's going to work. JJ Redick could turn this Laker team into a playoff team. He could get them back to at least a top 5 team at best. Now, that's going to be hard because the Denver Nuggets are still big threats. You have the Dallas Mavericks, who just won the Western Conference. The Minnesota Timberwolves are also big threats as well. And then we can go through all the list of Western Conference teams that were in the playoffs and those teams that were on the cusp of making the playoffs but not there. This is clearly a case where, the Lakers are just taking a big chance, and there's a lot of distrust from their fan base. They're calling it a circus show. Well, there's definitely been a lot of crazy things that have happened in Lakers lore, but I just feel that the Los Angeles Clippers, or not the Clippers, the Los Angeles Lakers, now that I think about it, you could switch the team names and have the Clippers call themselves the Lakers and the Lakers call themselves the Clippers, because that's exactly what's happening right now. But, it's just one of those things that I just feel, I just don't trust what they're doing. And I don't think anybody should trust what they're doing. They can be skeptical, but you just have to be wary that this could potentially backfire on JJ Redick. But I do think he'll do more than what Darvin Ham did in their 2 seasons. The biggest issue is whether or not you're going to have to deal with LeBron James. Well, you're going to have to deal with LeBron James. The issue is, can you coach LeBron James? And it's a possibility that the Lakers might be going after LeBron James' son, Bronny James, in the upcoming NBA draft. If that were the case where you have a father-son relationship or a father-son duo in the NBA on the same team, can you coach those guys? There's just a lot of uncertainty with the Lakers over this move. But I guess sometimes this is the best way to handle it. You're going to have to be thrown into the fire. And JJ Redick is being thrown into the fire. He's going to have to perform. But if he doesn't perform well after a few years, he'll probably get fired for sure. And ultimately, I think if JJ were to get another opportunity, he can hopefully learn from his mistakes and then continue to go on from there. But that's the thing. Why not give JJ Redick a chance to be an assistant coach with a lesser known team? Why not have him coach the Charlotte Hornets? He played at Duke. Charlotte's in North Carolina. Have him go there. Have him have a reunion there. Why not have him go to Philadelphia and be an assistant coach? He had some success there. It's just comical that the Lakers are putting themselves in this situation. And for this particular reason, I just can't see it working. And if it does work, I'll admit that I'm wrong. But ultimately, I think the Lakers are committing themselves a big mistake by hiring JJ Redick, someone that should not, at least be a head coach as of right now. But I guess sometimes you want to get thrown into the fire, then hey, you get thrown into the fire. I don't blame JJ for taking the job. I think he ultimately did want to coach someday, and he's getting an opportunity to do so. And whatever the Lakers are offering him, I guess it was good enough for him to take the position. But we'll see what happens. I think this is going to be a bad move at the end of the day. But what is also a bad move are the coaching hires that we're going to be talking about in my top 5 list for the next segment. Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back. All this talk about JJ Redick being hired by the Los Angeles Lakers had gotten me to thinking, is he going to be a great coach? Is he going to be a bad coach? I don't know if he's going to be a real bad coach, but I don't know if this was the right move for the Los Angeles Lakers. But then again, I could be wrong. So I will admit that I'm wrong if it turns out that it was the right move for the Los Angeles Lakers. But just in case, I decided to come up with a top 5 list of what I consider the worst coaching hires in the history of sports. Now, folks, here are my rules. You have to have a really bad season. There has to be a lot of dysfunction. Now, the coach coming in has to be a hot commodity who had previous success with their previous organization that they were at, and they come in bringing in these high expectations and high hopes only to crash and burn and lead to a very terrible stretch where they're losing a lot of games, and then there's, of course, some controversy, though it goes a long way. So, yeah, therefore, it is without question the top 5 worst coaching hires of all time. Now, names that came in with hot reputations and hot respects, but, yeah, definitely guys that you look back on and you would say to yourself, what were those organizations thinking about? So, without further ado, here are my top 5 worst coaching hires of all time. Starting off at number 5, I have Jeff Saturday to the Indianapolis Colts. Now, this is kind of a similar situation with JJ Redick to the Lakers having no head coaching experience whatsoever. Jeff Saturday didn't even have head coaching experience. Now, he did coach some youth football or high school football. I can't remember what it was, but he did have coaching experience there. But we're talking, of course, about the ultimate level. And he, of course, was an analyst on ESPN during their NFL segments, and he was pretty good at that stuff. So the story of the Indianapolis Colts at that time was this. They were sitting at 3-5-1 to start the 2022 season when they decided that they were going to fire then head coach Frank Reich. Now, Frank Reich had been doing a pretty decent job with the Colts, although part of the reason why he struggled with the Colts was because the quarterback play was not as consistent. Like, Frank Reich came in, he was expected to coach Andrew Luck, and that was deemed to be a very good move. Andrew Luck was going to continue to bring success to the Colts, and he was going to lead them to a championship with Frank Reich as a head coach. Well, for some reason, Andrew Luck later admitted through dealing with some mental health-related issues and everything, he announces his retirement, and that puts the Colts in a little bit of a disarray as far as their quarterback situation. And they brought in a number of quarterbacks. Matt Ryan was there. Nick Foles was there. You had Carson Wentz, and you also had Phillip Rivers. So the quarterback situation for the Colts was very bizarre. And unfortunately, that would lead to a 3-5-1 start for the Indianapolis Colts when Frank Reich was fired by Jim Irsay. And there were a number of options you could have gone to for the Colts in that situation to be as far as who was going to be the next head coach. But of all the options, Jim Irsay decides to turn to ESPN analyst Jeff Saturday, despite, double-checking my figures here, despite coaching at the high school level and all that. And this move was met with a lot of surprise and a lot of criticism, and a lot of people that have really, like Bill Cowher was notoriously very critical about this move. He was a former head coach for the Steelers who works on CBS. He basically said that this was really a mockery for all the coaches that have had the opportunities to be the head coach and have not gotten that opportunity, and or some words to that extent. And Colts owner Jim Irsay defended the move. He said, "Look, Saturday, if he does well, he could remain the head coach beyond 2022, whereas the general manager, Chris Ballard, said that they had tried to hire Saturday back in 2019 as an offensive line coach and also for that position prior to the 2022 season. So instead of having other opportunities promoting someone within the organization, they brought Jeff Saturday along. He becomes the head coach. He did say that, look, chances are the Colts are going to go 0-8 for the rest of the season, and that's something that they have to live with. But, he was going to do all we can to figure out what the team was and everything, and, just go from there and just see what the Colts can do for the upcoming future. Well, Jeff Saturday said they were going to go 0-8. He disappointed a lot of people when they won their first game against the Las Vegas Raiders 25-20. But from that point on, everything just went downhill. And that included the worst choke of any kind in the history of the NFL. The Colts led 33-0 over the Minnesota Vikings, and the Vikings came back to win in overtime. Thank you to the city of Minnesota, by the way, for doing such a thing. Because the Houston Oilers in 92, the wild card game against the Buffalo Bills, who ironically was quarterbacked by Frank Wright in that game. Frank Wright was a backup quarterback to Jim Kelly. Kelly had gotten hurt, so he missed that wild card game, but Frank Wright came in and led the greatest NFL comeback at that time, and probably still the best comeback in postseason history. So, but all that said, Jeff Saturday ends up going 1-7. Colts finished third in the AFC South, and I gotta tell you what, I really wish the Colts. Part of me wishes the Colts had went 2-8, because that would have given the Texans a chance to have the number 1 pick in the upcoming NFL draft, where they could have taken either Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud, or maybe they still take Stroud in that regards. But needless to say, one decision by Lovie Smith, which leads to a massive fourth down Hail Mary, which is not intercepted by the Colts, but it's caught by the Texans, and then they go for 2 to win the game. Yeah, that's a story for another day. But yeah, Jeff Saturday is number 5, not because, he's a Colts legend, don't get me wrong. A lot of fans in Indianapolis love him, even though they wish it wasn't him who took the position at that time. But he gets number 5 just simply because you knew it was not going to work out. He was honest about it. But he was a former analyst who took the job without any head coaching experience. So kind of similar to J.J. Redick's situation. But that's why Jeff Saturday is number 5 for me. Now, number 4, this is an interesting one. We're going to go all the way back in time, and we're going to go overseas. We're going to go over the Atlantic Ocean to England, and we're going to be talking about Brian Clough. Now, Brian Clough, for those that might not be familiar with soccer, is a legend in England soccer. He was a former striker player, but he was also a manager. He had some great success. He had done a lot of accomplishments for programs such as Hartlepool United, Derby County, and Brighton and Nottingham Forest. So he was very tremendous and very successful, especially with Nottingham Forest winning European Cups and League Cups during his tenure there. And a lot of people tend to forget that Brian Clough never managed an England national team. He's the greatest manager that was never tabbed to be the manager of the England team. And I think that's a real tragedy, considering England went through a period where they weren't in World Cup contention. And I think they could have maybe done some good things if he were the manager, but who knows. But, Clough was also very like an analyst or someone that was on TV a lot, giving his takes on a lot of his soccer takes or football takes, depending on what you prefer to call it as. One of the teams he was very critical of was Leeds United. Now, Leeds United at that time was a very, I don't want to say they were a dirty team, but they played soccer that a lot of the teams were very annoyed and rubbed off the wrong way. And most of that had to do with the manager, with Don Revie at that time. Now, to contrast in American sports, think of the bad boy Detroit Pistons. That's how Leeds United played. They were a very good team. They were one of the strongest teams. But then the manager, Don Revie, gets the opportunity to coach the England national team, which it doesn't work out well for him. But the position is open for a new manager, and sure enough, Brian Clough takes the position. And This was a very shocking move because he was very critical of Leeds United in the past, and players and their fans were very distrusting of him. They didn't know they knew he didn't like them. They didn't know what to expect, but certainly he wasn't a fan of Leeds United. So he comes in with this idea that not only am I going to continue their success, but I'm going to do it in a better way than what they've been doing for the last couple years. And the story goes that during one of his first training sessions with the team, he said, and I quote, "You can all throw your medals in the bin because they were not won fairly. In other words, they are tainted. They have an asterisk by it." And you know me, I am not a fan of the asterisk argument, but I'll save that for another time as well. So soccer kind of works like football, though they play more games, but they do it on a week-to-week basis. And he only lasted 44 days on that job. And he ended up winning just one match in 6 games and before he was sacked. And yeah, it just wasn't good for him at that time. He did redeem himself to go on to have great success at Nottingham Forest, but there's actually a movie about it, a movie about Brian Clough's tenure with Leeds United. It's called The Damned United. So yeah, that's a movie. It's a British movie. It was based on a book, and the movie is actually called The Damned United as well. It starred Michael Sheen. It was around 2009. So yeah, there's a movie about that, which y'all can watch if you have some time. The Damned United was the movie. But Brian Clough, being critical of the team that he would eventually become a manager of, and not getting off to a great start and earning their respect, yeah, I think he's definitely worth being number 4 or on this top 5 list. At number 3, and I might be cheating a little bit here, but number 3 I have PJ Carlesimo to the Golden State Warriors. Now, we all know the Warriors as one of the most dominant teams with Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and then for a brief period, Kevin Durant. But back in the 1990s, they were just awful. They were dreadful. And they had some success early in the 90s, but never could get to that next level. So they hire PJ Carlesimo in the beginning of 1997 to coach the Golden State Warriors. Well, it was not really a good match. The Warriors wanted someone who was strict and tough and could discipline them even more. But Carlesimo at times did, in fact, cross the line. Now, it didn't quite work out as you would have expected. I mean, PJ Carlesimo never had a winning season with the Golden State Warriors. He was fired eventually in December of 1999 when the Warriors got off to another losing start for the 3rd straight year. But sadly, the reason why Carlesimo is on this list is not so much for, well, he didn't cause any controversy. He was kind of on the other end of some controversy. And that, of course, is with the situation with Latrell Sprewell. Now, for those that don't recall, Latrell Sprewell was the Warriors' best player at that time. And he was the leading scorer and all that. But he and Carlesimo had butted heads from time to time. And it finally came to a head during a practice in December of that 97 season when Carlesimo criticized Sprewell for not going at it 100%, and Sprewell, who for some reason had been building up this anger and frustration, he just boiled over. It erupted, and he went to Carlesimo and he put his hand on Carlesimo's neck and it just choked him. Carlesimo was okay, but he did have some marks on him, and there were more issues and other types of violence. Nothing too serious, but Sprewell was, kicked out of practice, and it became this big hoopla, and it really ruined Latrell Sprewell's reputation for the rest of his life, even though he in some ways would have some other successes for later years. But, the Warriors terminated Sprewell's contract, and the NBA suspended him for an entire season, which was before Ron Artest came along. But PJ Carlesimo, even though he was the victim in this particular case, I'm not saying, nobody should get choked up, but I think the frustration and some of the things that he was saying to Sprewell, I can understand. I don't know if in today's world something like that would be acceptable. Nobody should put their hands on a coach. But I would say that PJ Carlesimo might have deserved some fault. And I'm not saying he didn't deserve it, but he probably should have had a better understanding of why Latrell Sprewell was the way he was, and they should have maybe talked about it to clear the air, but it just never was going to work out. And unfortunately for Carlesimo, that's what he's best known for. Now, he's gone on to have some other great successes. He won 3 championships with the San Antonio Spurs as an assistant coach, which in some ways was happy for him. But, you know, when you think of PJ Carlesimo, you don't think of a guy that won 3 NBA championships with the Spurs. You don't think of him coaching Seton Hall to the NCAA tournament and actually reaching the national championship game one year with Seton Hall. You think of him as a guy that got choked by Latrell Sprewell. But even then, he was never really a coach that was capable of winning. Like, his entire career in the NBA, I mean, sure, 239 wins, 315 losses, that's just not going to get it done. So the Warriors at that particular moment, I mean, when you look at the records, 1963, 21-29, remember that was the lockout shortened year. And then early in the 99 season, he was 6-21 before he got fired. So PJ Carlesimo, unfortunately, even though he should in some ways be sympathized for, have some sympathy to be, for being choked. But yeah, you deserve to be on the list when you can't build a team based on your coaching style, and you haven't been able to improve that team after 3 seasons. So he's number 3 for me. Number 2, and folks, I think we should not be surprised with this one, but I have Bobby Petrino to the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Bobby Petrino, he's not really a coach you can really trust. He's the kind of coach that if you were sitting with your son as a recruit and you had your wife with there, you would make sure you keep your hands on your wallet at all times, and you would make sure you lock arms with your wife as tight as possible, because he could really be a guy that can sell some ideas, and he could be a deceiver. And as we know, he's had some infamous moments, if you will, that that has caused some controversy. But Bobby Petrino was at Louisville in 2003 as a head coach, and he was there. He had turned that program around to at least one of the top teams. They didn't win a national championship, but they were certainly one of the top teams in the country. And Petrino had just signed a 10-year contract to stay as head coach for Louisville. But then in January 2007, he accepted a head coaching job with the Atlanta Falcons. They signed him to a 5-year, $24 million contract. And one of the reasons why Bobby Petrino was brought in was because he was brought in to develop Michael Vick, who was really an electric mobile quarterback. But this was an opportunity to develop him into an elite quarterback to be more complete and be considered one of the best. Well, unfortunately, before all that happened, Michael Vick got arrested for an illegal dogfighting operation, which we know was really tragic, and therefore he was unable to play in that 2007 season. And that's what really started the unfortunate break. But even worse, Atlanta had actually traded Michael Vick's backup, Matt Schaub, to the Houston Texans, which was a really good move for the Texans then, because they needed a quarterback who can throw the ball and develop. But so they ended up with Joey Harrington, Byron Leftwich, and Chris Redman as Falcons quarterbacks. Not quite the guys you would want to have win the division, let alone the Super Bowl. And so Atlanta, through 13 games, they were at the bottom of the NFC South, and that's where controversy happened. They lost to the New Orleans Saints, a division rival, and there were questions about whether Petrino was going to be fired and all that from their owner, Arthur Blank, who asked Petrino about it. He said, basically, Bobby Petrino did. He said, "Don't worry, I'm still with Atlanta, this and that." And so Arthur Blank was going to have a press conference to remind everyone that, look, Bobby Petrino is still the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. No problem there. Well, the next day, shocking news, everyone, Bobby Petrino has resigned to become the head coach at the University of Arkansas. And that was a real shocking move. But even more shocking was when rather than address the players personally, he sent every one of them a 4-sentence note, which basically said, I apologize, I've taken the job, I wish you all the best, yada, yada, yada. All in 4 sentences. And that was considered to be very critical and very criticized. One Falcons player actually wrote down coward on that letter he received. So, Bobby Petrino, is considered a bad coach with that stint with the Atlanta Falcons. Not so much that, the first part, I would say, was not his fault because it was just bad timing. But the fact that he had the decency to quit after going 3-10 and not even and telling the owner, look, I'm still the head coach, but then secretly going behind his back and accepting his job with Arkansas, that was a real gutless coward move. And suffice to say, there were more issues coming along with Bobby Petrino, but needless to say, that was a different story. That's a different story for another time. But Bobby Petrino is certainly a coach you don't want to trust if you were dealing with looking for a new head coach. And our number one worst coaching hire of all time, very recent, Urban Meyer II, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And folks, I got to tell you what, I was surprised with how everything planned out because Urban Meyer was a very successful college football coach. He won 2 national championships with the University of Florida. He won a national title with Ohio State. And he gets the opportunity to coach in the NFL. You think about it. Urban Meyer going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They had just drafted the number 1 pick, which was Trevor Lawrence. An opportunity for Jacksonville was right there to be considered a contender for the AFC South division. This was an opportunity for the Jacksonville Jaguars to really make some noise here. But this is where things went wrong for Jacksonville. It started in July of 2021. The NFL fined Meyer $100,000 for violating practice rules during organized team activities. Then come early October, this is where the fortunes began to turn for Urban Meyer. There was a video of him at his restaurant in Columbus, Urban Meyer's Penthouse, that's the name of the restaurant, where he was inappropriately dancing and touching a woman that wasn't even his wife. Dude, you're married and you're fooling around with another woman even though you weren't doing worse things? Come on now, that's ridiculous. Yeah, it really hurt his image at that particular moment. And that's when, I don't know. I mean, that was just a real, very inexcusable situation for Urban Meyer. And he, of course, apologized and to the team and to the personnel. But that's kind of where the turning point of Urban Meyer situation started. And they were already off to a bad start, the Jacksonville Jaguars. They didn't win their first game until October 17th against the Miami Dolphins. And then they won their second game, which they actually upset the Buffalo Bills in November. But at near the end of the season, there were a number of players that were critical of Meyer's treatment of them, and there was, which led to questions about Meyer's job security. Was he going to be all right? Urban Meyer finished 13 games, winning 2, so he went 2-11, and then he was fired. And his 13-game tenure is tied actually with Bobby Petrino and Lou Holtz for the 4th shortest coaching tenures in the history of the NFL. So that was a real bad break. But it gets worse because in December, Josh Lambo, who was a former kicker for the Jacksonville Jaguars, actually accused Urban Meyer for a physical abuse, basically saying Meyer had repeatedly kicked his leg, Lambeau's leg, during warm-ups prior to the team's last preseason game. And that was, basically what happened was Lambeau told him, hey, don't do that. You're the boss. You can't do that to an employee anywhere. And then that's when Meyer, said, I'm the head ball coach. I'll kick you wherever the bleep I want. And Lambeau reported that incident to his agent, who reported it to the Jaguars, and that's when the owner, Sahid Khan, said, yeah, this has gone on long enough, we're going to fire him. So, and, like, Urban Meyer, you can look at him as one of two ways. You can either look at him as a successful college head football coach, and a lot of people will say that. He was a better coach in college than he was in the National Football League. But you can also look at him as for what he did in Jacksonville, which unfortunately hurt his image. So, that's really the worst case scenario. But Urban Meyer is number one on this list, and recently, even though it was recent years, because while we had Bobby Petrino quit on his team to take another head coaching position in the middle of the season, while we had PJ Carlesimo, who was very strict and disciplinarian with the Golden State Warriors and was unfortunately choked out by one of his players, while we had Brian Clough, who was critical of the team he was about to manage and was unable to earn their respect, trying to change the way they played, and while we had Jeff Saturday, who accepted the position even though he had no head coaching experience, the fact is, Urban Meyer's coaching tenure is the worst because of what he did on the field, but more so what he did off the field. And I really hardly have any respect for him, and I don't know anybody that does at this point. Now, if you still like him, then I don't blame you, because, he was probably your favorite coach growing up. But as long as I hope that Urban Meyer learned from his mistakes, and I don't think he's ever going to get another coaching job in the NFL again, I would stay away from him. And I think this is a message for college coaches. There's a difference between the college game and the professional game, and I think everybody knows that. It's not just the players, but it's the coaches as well. And it's really hard to translate what you know in college to the NFL, because in college, you not only have to deal with all the plays, but you have to deal with the players and how they're doing in their classes, and you're recruiting new players and this and that. The NFL, you don't have that luxury, because all these players that you got are men. They're adults and everything. And that's where I think people get this idea of the temptations that come with the NFL. And I'm not saying, every coach would like the opportunity to coach in the NFL, but there's only so few jobs, and yet there's a lot of temptation that comes with that it's hard to prepare yourself for it. You're going to have to take some heat. You're going to be criticized and everything, and you just got to be a very responsible head coach. So, unfortunately, that's my top 5 list. Jeff Saturday, Brian Clough, PJ Carlesimo, Bobby Petrino, and Urban Meyer. And folks, we're going to take a break. But when we come back, I got one more thing to talk about. It's going to be a quick one, so stay tuned. We'll be right back. So, folks, the NBA Finals is officially over, and we are just about a month or so away from the start of the Olympic Games. But there's another sporting event that's going on right now, and that's the Stanley Cup Finals. This year, it's the Florida Panthers against the Edmonton Oilers. And, folks, I never would have envisioned doing one on this podcast. It's not that I don't like hockey. I like hockey. In fact, I've covered some hockey games when I was at a small town, East Texas Baptist University. Our hockey team was a club hockey team. And Marshall, Texas, of course, that's where East Texas Baptist University is. And you're saying, well, where do you play hockey in a small town like Marshall, Texas? We're about 30 or 45 minutes west of Shreveport, Louisiana, and they have a hockey arena over there. So we play our games in that area. So, but I like hockey. I just hardly talk about it as much. But I do know that the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers are playing in the Stanley Cup Finals. And about a week or so ago, the Panthers had a 3-0 series lead, and everyone's thinking, well, it's going to be a sweep, Florida's going to sweep the Edmonton Oilers and this and that. Folks, the Edmonton Oilers have officially come back from 3 down to decide a Game 7 in the Stanley Cup Finals. And I got to be honest with you, I did not see that coming. Now, I knew that hockey, it's more likely you're going to overcome a 3-0 deficit in hockey than you're going to get from basketball or baseball and all of that, which is really interesting. Just with all the unpredictability and the fact that you shoot the puck into the net and this and that. And this is real crazy in a sense. Now, historically, there has only been one time in the history of the Stanley Cup Finals that a team trailed 3-0 in a series, came back to win. And that was back in 1942 when the Toronto Maple Leafs overcame a 3-0 deficit to the Detroit Red Wings and won the series in 7 games. Now, it has also been done 3 other times, but they have occurred in the previous rounds before the Stanley Cup Finals. 1975, the New York Islanders defeated the Pittsburgh Penguins. 2010, the Philadelphia Flyers rallied back from 3-0 to beat the Boston Bruins. And then 4 years later, the Los Angeles Kings overcame a 3-0 deficit to the San Jose Sharks in the first round of that playoff series. So, that has really been a remarkable achievement. But there have also been 5 times where teams overcame a 3-0 deficit to force a deciding Game 7, but did not win that series. So it's one of those cases where we have an opportunity to see some history. And Game 7 is going to be in Miami, which is where the Florida Panthers play. And we're either going to see the Panthers win their first Stanley Cup in the history of their franchise, or we're going to see the Edmonton Oilers pull off the biggest comeback in the history of the Stanley Cup Finals. And not only that, but bring home the Stanley Cup to the country of Canada. Because even though hockey is Canada's game, they have not had a team since 1993, when the Montreal Canadiens defeated the Los Angeles Kings, win a Stanley Cup. I mean, I know Canada still loves their hockey and everything, and I know they have players that get drafted to go to teams in the United States. But man, if I were Canadian, I would certainly love to see my team win a Stanley Cup, whether it's Edmonton, Vancouver, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto for that matter. I mean, I can get used to seeing Canada win international tournaments, but come on. For once, we don't need to be united. We need to have a team that needs to win a Stanley Cup to show that hockey is Canada's game and to be a reminder of that. So, Stanley Cup has been in the United States for way too long. So, go figure with that. But anyways, folks, Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals will take place on Monday at 7 o'clock. So Game 7 will be on Monday. So you'll have about 2 days of rest and excitement to hype up Game 7 in what should be a remarkable Stanley Cup Finals. And it has been a true remarkable Stanley Cup Finals up to this point. So I don't know. Do I want to see the Panthers win their first Stanley Cup, or do I want to see the comeback complete? That's hard to say. I mean, because Miami's been through a lot lately. Like, they've lost some championships. Like, they lost the NBA Finals. They lost the Stanley Cup Finals last year. Oh, man. What do I want to see? That's a tough call. As much as I want to see Edmonton win and bring the Stanley Cup back, I think Florida is going to bounce back, and I think they're going to figure it out. And it might be a close game, maybe go into overtime, but I think Florida will ultimately recover and take Game 7 to win the Stanley Cup Finals. So with that being said, folks, thank you very much for listening into this podcast. We had a great show talking about J.J. Redick and also giving out my takes for the worst top 5 coaching hires and a little talk about Matthew Stafford's wife in particular. So you guys will be able to listen to this podcast on Spotify and Podbeam, and I'm going to be uploading that, as always, to my YouTube channel at KWCLINE91. And folks, this is episode 18 of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. So until then, good night, so long, and I will see you next time on this episode.